highly anticipated Indian Wells third round match between Coco Gauff and Alex Eala ended in disappointing, really heartbreaking fashion as Coco retired down 2-6 love 2 due to a left arm injury. Gauff won their previous match a couple weeks ago in the Dubai quarterfinals, only dropping 2 games. It was 6 love 6-2. This match, of course, was very different. Coco didn't hold serve one time in the match. She had 4 game points at 2-1, and she had a 40 love lead at 2-3, but couldn't get over the finish line due to double faults or just errant forehands. Gauff, who finished the match with 7 double faults, noticeably went for a lot more on her second serve in this match, hitting it with an average speed of 98 miles per hour at one point.
The match was over. Coco Gauff walked quietly to the net and met Alex Eala for the final handshake. For a brief moment, the two shared a few quiet words. No microphones caught it, and no one in the stadium could hear what was said. But later, Gauff revealed what that moment meant, and it says far more than the final score ever could. According to Gauff, the exchange at the net was filled with mutual respect. It wasn't about frustration or disappointment. Instead, it was a simple acknowledgement of an incredible performance. Eala had just delivered a level of tennis that demanded respect, and Gauff made sure to recognize it. After the match, Gauff spoke openly about how impressed she was with Eala's composure and confidence on such a big stage. She praised her movement, her shot-making, and the way she handled the pressure throughout the match. For a player who has already reached the very top of the sport, that kind of praise carries serious meaning. Moments like this are what define great competitors. It showed Gauff's class in defeat and confirmed that Eala is earning the respect of the very best players on tour. And it also raises an exciting question for the future. If this match is any indication, we may be witnessing the early stages of a rivalry that could shape women's tennis for years to come. 2 young stars, both fearless, both incredibly talented, pushing each other to new heights every time they meet on court. So now we want to hear from you. After seeing this moment at the net and hearing what Gauff had to say afterward, does it change how you see the future of this rivalry?
That'll probably do it, yeah. Well, that stinks. 2 of the game's brightest stars. You hear Coco Gauff apologizing. There's no need for that.
My arm is going like this the whole time, so I'm sorry. You're playing great.
An apologetic Coco Gauff. That just speaks to her class. She is a one of one.
Coco Gauff sat down in her post-match press conference at Indian Wells, and someone asked her what Alexandra Eala had said at the net after the retirement. There had clearly been a moment there. Both players looked like they felt the weight of how the match had ended. Gauff regretful, Eala visibly concerned, and they stood together briefly before going their separate ways. The cameras caught it. Everyone watching wanted to know what was said. Gauff's answer was simple. Eala told her she hoped she felt better. Things like that. Short, genuine, human. No performance, no drama. Just one competitor checking on another in a moment that had nothing to do with rankings or trophies. That small exchange at the net, it turns out, says more about Alexandra Eala than any of the match statistics do. Because being gracious in defeat is common enough in professional sport. Being genuinely kind in victory, particularly toward the player who had beaten you 6-0, 6-2 2 weeks earlier, is a different thing entirely. The full picture: 2 weeks before Indian Wells, these same 2 players met in the Dubai quarterfinals. Gauff won comprehensively. That scoreline was not a close match decided by a handful of critical points. It was a dominant, controlled performance from the first game to the last, the kind of result that circulates on social media as evidence of the gap that still exists between a rising player and an established Grand Slam champion. Those assessments in that moment were not wrong. Gauff was simply the better player that day. When the Indian Wells draw placed them together again, most observers anticipated a similar outcome. That is usually how it works when the quality gap is that clearly established. Eala, apparently, had been spending the 2 intervening weeks working on a different answer. In her own post-match interview, she described taking specific learnings from Dubai and implementing them, being more aggressive, sharper in her focus, more intentional in her movement and tempo control. The statistics from the Indian Wells match confirm that this was not a vague pre-match aspiration. She made 68% of her first serves. She won 59% of points on that first serve. She created 6 break-point opportunities against the world number 4 and converted 5 of them. Those are not the numbers of a player who got lucky. Those are the numbers of a player who arrived with a game plan, executed it from the first game, and made a Grand Slam champion uncomfortable throughout. Gauff, meanwhile, was managing something physical from early in the opening set. A trainer was called. Her left shoulder and arm received treatment during the match. Her first serve percentage dropped to 44%. She committed 7 double faults in the first set alone. By the time the second set began and she lost her serve in the second game, the retirement felt less like a possibility and more like a question of timing. What Gauff actually said, the part of Gauff's press conference that deserved more attention than it received, was not the injury update. It was everything else. She said she felt genuinely bad about having to retire. She said you never want to leave a match that way. And then she added something specific, that she felt worse about it because of how well Eala was playing. She did not want to take anything away from her opponent's performance. That is a remarkable thing to say from a player who was simultaneously dealing with physical pain and the disappointment of an early exit at a major event. She was not obligated to say it. She could have addressed the injury, expressed disappointment, and moved on. Instead, she made a deliberate point of directing the attention toward Eala's tennis and ensuring the credit landed where it belonged. She went further. She said she would rather have finished the match and lost 6-0 than walk off and leave it unresolved. The world number 4, a 2-time Grand Slam champion, would have preferred a comprehensive defeat to an incomplete result, and framed that preference explicitly in terms of not wanting to shortchange her opponent's performance. That framing tells you something specific about how Gauff views the competition and how she views Eala within it. She closed with a quiet prediction. I think she's going to have a great tournament. Coming from someone who had just spent the better part of an hour on the same court as Eala and seen firsthand what her game looks like when everything is working, that is not a throwaway line. The rivalry, the head-to-head between these two players, now sits at 1 win apiece. 2 matches, 2 completely different results. Gauff dominant in Dubai, Eala dominant in Indian Wells before the retirement-ended proceedings. That kind of swing, that level of variability across consecutive encounters, tells you that neither player has fully solved the other yet, which makes every future meeting between them genuinely unpredictable and genuinely interesting. Women's tennis at the top of the rankings has been defined for several years by a relatively stable hierarchy of established players whose games are deeply familiar to each other. The emergence of a challenger who can walk onto the court 2 weeks after a 6-0 loss and produce one of the most controlled performances of the current season, against the same opponent on a different surface, introduces a competitive dynamic that the existing hierarchy cannot treat as settled. Gauff has been consistently generous in how she speaks publicly about Eala. After the Dubai match, she specifically thanked the Filipino fan base for transforming the venue's atmosphere and called it positive for the sport. She said she understands why people root for Eala and that she roots for her too when they are not playing each other. An established player using their own platform to amplify a rising competitor's impact is not a universal instinct in professional sport. Gauff has done it repeatedly, and given the size of her following and the reach of her voice in tennis conversations globally, that generosity has real value. From Eala's side, the respect is equally genuine. In her press conference, she talked about Gauff as a great player who will always give you difficulty. She did not treat the retirement as an occasion for a larger moment than it was. She acknowledged the circumstances, expressed concern for Gauff's health, and pointed to her own performance as the meaningful takeaway, because the execution was real regardless of how the match ended, and she knew it. Gauff made sure the tennis world knew it too. What comes next? The round of 16 brings Linda Noskova, powerful, experienced at this level, and entirely capable of making the next match difficult. Eala goes into it carrying something that results alone cannot fully manufacture. The confidence that comes from outplaying a Grand Slam champion so thoroughly that the champion herself goes out of her way to credit the performance in her own press conference. That is where Eala is right now. 20 years old, ranked 31st in the world, in the round of 16 at Indian Wells for the first time in her career, with Coco Gauff telling anyone who will listen that the tournament is about to get more interesting. The whisper at the net was simple: get well soon. Nothing designed for the cameras, nothing performed for the moment. Two people who respect each other. In a moment neither of them wanted to end the way it did, being decent. Human beings. But that small exchange contains the whole story. It tells you who Eala is when the match is over and the cameras are still rolling. It tells you who Gauff is when she has nothing left to prove and chooses generosity anyway. And it tells you that this rivalry, however it develops across the next several years, is going to be worth watching closely. The tennis is compelling. The people playing it are better still. Hit like and subscribe to follow every chapter as it unfolds. This one is far from finished.